So part of the reason we weren't able to connect is, you'll see on the slide, I actually just changed jobs. So I'm now the VP of marketing for a company called Diamante. It's a tech startup in San Jose, and we make integrated hardware and software solutions for the Kubernetes and cloud native space. However, I came here to talk about some of the experiences I had leading product marketing, both at Docker as well as VMware. So let's get started. About a decade ago, Forrester announced that we were entering what they called the age of the customer. This was really a follow-on to the age of information that started in the 90s with the internet. Now, you and I and all of us in this room are part of the age of the customer, because how many people here have a Netflix subscription? So if you think about what Netflix is, it's entertainment on demand. Now, some of us also maybe have Spotify subscription, and that's music on demand. And we're here in Austin, where I'm not from, but I know it's the headquarters of Whole Foods. Now, let's raise our hand, who's honest, who's done grocery on demand? Yeah. So that's what they were talking about in terms of the age of the customers, the ability for us to get what we want, when we want it, where we want it, at your fingertips. But this age of the customer isn't limited to retail and consumer behavior. It's really drifted into B2B businesses as well. So there's a book I read. It's written by Tian Zhou, who was one of the original employees and leaders at Salesforce. He then went on to found Zora, which is a subscription billing company. And he wrote this book, Subscribed. And I definitely recommend it if you're interested in this topic. He's the one who really saw that this age of the customer is flipping the business model upside down. So we used to operate in a world where we want to make this blockbuster killer product. And then I went to business school, we thought about the 4 Ps. Now you have the product, now it's pricing, promotion, and placement. But in this new era where the speakers earlier, you can find information by yourself now. You can go online and do your research. We have to really start to flip that business model upside down and put customers in the middle and think about what you serve your customers when they need it. So I'm going to talk about as a service. Not all as a service has to be subscription-based, but there are a lot of benefits for doing so. So I'm going to kind of change those terms a little bit frequently, but in a sense, there are benefits in thinking about giving your customers what they want when they want it. So why did I pick this topic? Well, it may help to understand a little bit of my own background. So I started my PMM life at VMware back in 2008. And then if you think about some of the things that were happening in the market at that time, in 2009, Salesforce crossed the $1 billion revenue mark. And I like to say they were one of the first companies that proved this software as a service B2B business has legitimate legs. Followed that in 2012, AWS also crossed the $1 billion revenue mark, and they really proved infrastructure as a service as a model that really works. In fact, it spurred on a whole new public cloud business. Now, back in the day, VMware's business was software perpetual licenses. So this is, we sold a license, and then people got to keep it forever, minus a little bit of a support and subscription to keep renewing on that. But their main revenue was this perpetual license. But they saw what was happening at Salesforce, at AWS, and other places, and realized that there was a shift happening and that they needed to help get on board. So I was part of the team, and actually there's another team member who was part of that team here, who launched the first VMware product as a service offering, which was called vCloud Air. So I was part of that initial team, helped launch that product, that new service offering. And then a few years later, I joined Docker. Some of you who do deal with developers have probably heard of Docker. Docker was a super popular developer tool in the open source space. But let's think what happened in the era that I was at Docker. Well, first, there was a blockbuster acquisition that Microsoft made of GitHub. If you don't know GitHub's business, it's based on developer subscriptions. They start as individuals, they subscribe to the service. Maybe they want to work with their team members, they upgrade to like a team-based membership. Maybe they spread that in their department, they upgrade to a departmental subscription, company-wide subscription. But their fundamental business model is building these individual subscribers and building that into a $7.5 billion acquisition. You can also look at PagerDuty, which IPO'd last year. They're an IT tools as a service company. So again, similar model of being able to incrementally grow their business by offering new features and capabilities when you want them. So Docker today is actually focusing a lot on this as well. Again, super popular developer tool, but what they recognize is they've got over 2.5 million desktop users, but they want to build this subscription business to give you more and more of what you want and grow that. But like I said, I just jumped over to a new company, Diamante, and what was interesting here is they are both a hardware and a software provider. So they have a hardware box that they sell with software subscription on top. And so I'm helping to launch that business in San Jose. So why is this topic really interesting to me? Well, as we said, as a user, as consumers, we know what we get out of Netflix. We know what we get out of Spotify. But there's also benefits to the companies to make this move. And so some of the things that companies are able to do when they have this as a service model is you can release more features more frequently. So you don't have to wait for the waterfall of every half year or year to launch a new feature. If there's something that your market needs and your engineers build it, you can release it. And that really helps you to stay on top of the growing competition that somebody else mentioned. But another benefit that we as marketers should really understand is we really increase the level of engagement we have with our customers. So you're having active conversations on an ongoing basis, understanding what they're using and consuming, and so that you can give them more. And this is a big part of what we need to do in the product planning as well, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the tips around that. But the ability to be able to do A/B testing and release a feature and then see if people consume it. If they don't, you can come back, fix it, re-release it, things like that. It gives you that agile delivery model. And of course, one other benefit for the business is going to be growing incremental revenue. So when you move to this as a service model, you don't have to think about this monolithic piece of whatever it is that you're selling. You can always add more value to it and get people to upsell. And in some industries, you can also do demand-based pricing. So Uber, who's ever had to do surge pricing in Austin, I guess? Yeah, so the idea being when you deliver something as a service, you have that flexibility. But making this shift, especially at companies like VMware and even at Docker, is not easy, and there's a lot of complications with making this transition. So let me talk to you about a few of these complications. The first is the sales model. So when you have sales teams that are used to selling large, million-dollar ELAs, moving them from that to an annual subscription or even monthly subscription is a very tough transition. One of the companies that I actually have a lot of admiration for who has successfully made this transition is actually Microsoft. So Angelia, you mentioned Office 365. A few years back when Microsoft was making the move to Office 365 and Azure, they changed the incentive models and the compensation model for sales. When they did that, they lost a lot of good sellers. And I know that because some of them went over to VMware. But they lost good sellers who were not ready to make that move. They're used to landing the big deal, getting paid for that, and then going on. In a as-a-service model, that's not the case. You're looking at something where you want to grow over time. So your land might be very small, but you're hoping to grow that engagement. The lifetime value of the customer can be much higher, but you have to convince your sales force that that's what they want to do. Another challenge is the importance of customer success. So similarly, you can't just sell your product and then walk away and come back in 3 years and see how you're doing. In the as-a-service model, you really need to think about how do you make your customers successful. And so you see a lot of companies investing in customer success teams. So these are the folks who are out there trying to make sure that after they get the customer in the door, help them grow, help them use the product, help them come back and renew and grow. One that touches us in the product marketing world that is important is the blending of user experience and buyer experience. I love pragmatic marketing. It's been a while since I've actually gone through the course, but I remember that there used to be a big focus on separating user experience and buyer experience. Product management owned the user experience. That is, What do they click on when they're in the product? What do they leverage in the product? Where product marketing's focus was, who's got the economic buying decision? How do we get in front of them? How do we convince them that they should spend this money on the product? But in an as-a-service model, they're one and the same, right? Your users are your buyers are your users. So there's not this huge delineation between the responsibilities. It blends in this transition. And then finally, as big partners of product marketing, the importance of digital marketing. And this was also mentioned before, which is people and buyers have access to whatever they want to research online now. So if you're not there to show them what you've got, they're going to miss the opportunity and they're not going to find you. So it's important to partner with the growth team or digital marketing team to make sure that this flows through to your new buyers and prospects. So the key here on all of these challenges, the thing that kind of unites them all, is the greater collaboration that's needed to make this happen. So in some of the more traditional businesses, you might have pretty strong silos of functions of what we do. I'm the UX engineer. I'm the PMM. I am the, the person who does the ERP system. But when you deal with this transition to as a service, everybody has to work together. Now, the beauty of it is I think that product marketing is best suited to drive a lot of that collaboration. We've talked about launch. We've talked about engaging all of the different departments. That's just something we always do anyways, right? So as a company, if you're making the move towards this as a service model, I encourage you guys to take a front and center role in making sure that all of this collaboration is actually happening. So the key here, again, is collaborate, discuss, work together. But what I wanted to do is use my own experience. As I said, I've done this now twice, both at VMware and Docker, and kind of share a couple of stories of challenges that we ran into and some guidelines and tips to help you if you are in the position of trying to do this transition. So here are the mistakes to avoid. The mistakes to avoid are jumping into your solutions too quickly, forgetting to track and measure, and working in silos. But let's think about how we can resolve some of these as well. So let's start with jumping into solutions. How many of you guys think of yourself as a technology company? Almost everyone, I hope. We were just talking about how Disney today is a technology company. So a lot of industries are really technology companies now. So here's the challenge. When you're in a technology company, you have great engineers. What do great engineers want to do? They want to fix things, right? They want to build something. I want to build a new feature. I want to build a new capability. The challenge with that when you're making a transition like this is you can go 3 steps down and 4 steps backwards because you hadn't thought through all of the things you needed to think through. So my guide here is start with core assumptions and principles. What we ended up doing, because we ran into this mistake where we tried something and then we realized we had to unravel it all, is we went down and we said, stop building. We're not building anything. We're just going to write down what our assumptions are and what our principles are. Specifically, I'm going to share one example, which was a billing system. So we wrote down some of these core assumptions. And I kind of genericized it because I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. But one of the core assumptions we needed to understand is our current ERP system was not set up for credit card billing. That was something we needed to know. Another one was that as a company, collecting and invoicing was not our strength. We're a tech company. What do we know about hunting down customers for invoices? So that was something we had to realize is we don't have the tool or the system we need to make this business work. But what were our principles and tenets? This is the mistake we had made. Our engineers wanted to build this from scratch. We're a small company. There's only so many engineers. This is not our expertise. We build awesome developer tools. We're not an e-commerce company. So we had to take a step back and realize amongst a cross-functional team that it was in our best interest to actually look for the best in the market for these things and not try to build it ourselves. The other piece of this, though, was recognizing that whatever we did here, whatever vendor we chose and whichever direction we went, we still do need engineering to help integrate it with the rest of the experience. So again, the engineers really wanted to build this, but it's not their expertise, but we still needed them to buy in on this concept. And that's why I say stop before you start building things, figure out what it is that you guys are trying to accomplish, get the buy-in from everybody that, yes, there are certain assumptions we have to make, let's work with them. All right, the second mistake is forgetting to put in the hooks into your experience so that you can always track and measure it. As marketers, I think we're pretty comfortable with concepts like page views, cost per click, and some of the digital marketing metrics that we prioritize. However, it doesn't stop there. So the engagement and the experience in a subscription should flow throughout the life of your customer. So it's important to think about all of the things you should track. From the engagement and how you get them onto your site, to the engagement and how they get to the free trial and registration, to when they've started using the product, but are they consuming it? Are they growing? Are they using more features? And making sure the hooks are in there. What's really key here is this is a collaboration, again, with your UX team as well as your product team, because you need to build in the product telemetry hooks inside your experience. And so this is key because part of as a service is this iterative process. It's this ability to tweak and tune and respond to what's changing in terms of behaviors. And so making sure you have the right hooks in place throughout the sales cycle. And then finally, I already touched on the increased need for collaboration. This one's really hard. I don't know if we've nailed it yet, but it's a very big challenge because, again, there's so many different work streams involved in launching a new go-to-market strategy, and a lot of people have to work together on this. In honesty, I hate to say it, but as PMMs, you're kind of touching everything. So you may have to go to all the meetings, but there is a need to try to streamline what is happening and focus on who needs to be in the room to have these conversations to get this across the finish line. And this one's, like I said, this one's very difficult, it's very challenging, but constant communication, collaboration will be key. All right, so let's think about two areas that product marketing is definitely in charge of when it comes to this. And what's great is I didn't see the other presenters' materials until I saw them present, but what's great is we all sort of agree on these main concepts. So you're not hearing one thing from one person and something else from somebody else. So I'm going to focus on launch strategy and content strategy. So on the launch side, I'm totally stealing your words. I don't think major and minor are great. I love the more descriptive words on what launches are. But one of the things we had to think about is what is your launch strategy going to look like? Your launch strategy versus your release strategy, some of those terminologies. I just put up some examples here. So Salesforce has now moved to a seasonal release where they try to bundle all the different new features and new capabilities for all their different products all in a season. So they have their winter release and then they spell out everything that's new in the winter. Visual Studio Code does a monthly one. AWS does sort of a blend of as you go. As new features come out, they blog about it. But they also leverage big events like reInvent as a way to put more emphasis around some of the bigger strategic initiatives. My point here is you're going to have to figure out what's right for your company, but you are going to need to adjust your launch strategy based on what you guys can support. My guidance here is mostly to make it repeatable so that there's a expected cadence of when things happen and how things happen. The worst is to train your customers to expect a monthly release and then shift to a seasonal or something like that. So stay consistent, figure out what that cadence is, what's right for you, but also think about launch moments. I like to think of it as there's a cadence of activities that we work towards a big event, and then you work towards the next big event. So how many of those can you support in a year? At Docker, it was kind of nice because we had the benefit of a lot of press and analysts paying attention to us. Now that I'm at a smaller company, I can't use the same strategy. So thinking about that, and again, tiering your releases so you understand what kind of noise and level of noise do you want. So again, I'm totally stealing the new words. But yes, launch strategy is an important part of what we do. And then the last piece is the content strategy. So everyone in this room knows about personas, and we know we need to give content that aligns to a persona. But part of the difference of a SaaS experience or an as-a-service experience is thinking about the different behavioral stages of those customers. So you might have, I just kind of created an example here, 3 different personas that you care about, and they might have different demographics in terms of size of the company, job title, or even experience levels. But for each of the personas you care about, you have to think about the content that helps them get onto your site, the content that helps them register for the free trial on your site, the content that helps them start using your product on your site. So it becomes a little bit of a mapping exercise, but you do want to think about the stages of their development and use of your product and what content they need at that point. Because again, it's about that continuous journey and growing them, having them come back and renew. And so we want to make sure that we actually have an idea of what needs to be in front of them at that point in time. And with that, that is what I wanted to cover. I didn't want to go too much into more details, but I definitely have some experiences looking at different vendors who have helped us along the way. I'm happy to talk about that throughout the conference.
Thank you, Jenny. Any questions for Jenny? Ooh, y'all gonna make me get my exercise in today. Thank you for meeting me halfway.
I thought it was really interesting how you talked about the blending of the user and the buyer. Have you seen any successful strategies where companies you've been at or others have actually been able to expand their buyer market as they've shifted to more of a subscription model, bringing kind of more, making the users buyers essentially?
Yeah, I mean, this is where I'll go back to the Microsoft model. And, you know, since they have moved and transitioned to that focus of Office 365 and Azure, you'll see their bottom line has improved, right? So the focus on ARR growth and, you know, getting that annual recurring revenue, they have transitioned from pretty significantly. And I think that's actually helped their position of staying, you know, as one of the biggest tech companies in the world. If they had not made that transition successfully, I don't think they would be where they are today.
Any other questions for Jenny? While I'm walking over here, Jenny, I'm going to ask you a question. And how difficult was the discussion you had with engineering when you went from allowing them to build the capability to telling them they needed to buy it?
That was a tough one, but one of the points I didn't call out in that slide that was kind of key was recognizing, hey, do you want to build a cool developer product, or do you want to be the security expert fixing, you know, bad fraud credit card issues, right? And so kind of making them see that this is not what you wanted to do, that's not why you joined the company, and making sure that they saw the benefit of letting the experts take care of that. Let somebody else who knows how to do that do that.
So I work for an enterprise software company. We are probably 3 years into the transition of moving from cloud to, or moving from license to cloud. We are struggling with, we've moved to a twice a year release model. We are struggling with sales enablement and the pace at which we come out with features and functions and new products and enable our sales quickly enough so that they are retaining information from the last release and able to move forward. How would you suggest, or what, you know, any best practices for not overwhelming sales yet making sure that they are enabled with the information at the right time?
Yeah, so I know it's going to be different in every organization. I'm actually a fan of the seasonal model because about 4 times a year is about what I think is right in terms of what people can absorb. What you do there, though, is, and this goes back to the other talk about planning a release, it goes back to you need to start planning that at inception, because the best thing to do is build it around a theme. Because if you have a theme for that release, maybe it's efficiency, maybe it's performance or something like that, you give people kind of that North Star to tack onto to really understand, and then you trickle down all the things that were packaged in that release. But you give that kind of a focus so that if I don't remember the 15 things you added, but I remember the theme, I get kind of the concept that I can take to the customer. But I do think about seasonal, is about the pace that like a mid-sized company can handle.
Any other questions for Jenny?
Thank you. So this is more of a comment, and I want to get your thoughts on it. I think what you spoke about in terms of transition to subscription model, XaaS as a service, leads in really well into this notion and concept that's now evolving now of product-led growth, and it really starts to change the way you think about product marketing and the role of product marketing in product-led growth. Because now you're moving away from the persona. Now, it's not the buyer as much, it's the user, and the user and buyer can be one.
Yeah.
But I want to get your thoughts on that transition in enterprise,
Yeah.
B2B. And there are some examples you mentioned, like PagerDuty, that have done that well. So I want to get your thoughts on what would be some of those changes.
Yeah, and that goes back to, I want to encourage all of you to put yourself front and center in the transition, right? When we were going through this at Docker, part of the challenge was small teams would get really psyched about something and go off and run with that. But that was the problem, is that they went like way down the street, and then everybody else was like, wait a second. Actually, here's a great example. Progressive profiling. Some of you guys know, if you use Marketo, Eloqua, whatever, it's the collection of information about your customers, what their job titles are, where they're located, et cetera. That's a concept we understand as marketers and product marketers. It's not a concept that our UX team was really familiar with. So in their best UX experience, we would never push you to give you our company name and job title, because that's a poor user experience. But many of you guys know, if you don't know who they are, you have no idea what to do with them, right? So you have to get that information. So that's exactly actually what happened. The UX team built these awesome, templates of like what the onboarding experience looks like, and they did not include collecting their information. So that's where I say, plant yourself in the middle of that conversation, making sure that, I'm connecting the dots between our marketing ops team and the UX team so that they talk and they understand that they don't have all the viewpoints that each other needs in order to do this. So I think that's the biggest shift for us.
Time for one more question. Any more questions for Jenny? All right. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Thank you.